Thank you, Rabbi Mader. Shana Tova to all of you. The confession on Yom Kippur is daunting. In a single paragraph, the liturgy tells us how we have gone astray. We betray, we steal, we scorn, we act perversely, we are cruel, we scheme, we are violent, we slander, we devise evil, we ridicule, we disobey, we abuse, we defy, we corrupt, we commit crimes, we are hostile, we are stubborn, we are immoral, we kill, we spoil, we go astray, and we lead others astray. That is a brutal portrayal of who we are. Yet we return every Yom Kippur, year after year, to read that about ourselves. Here we are, the miserable creatures described in our Mishkan HaNefesh. Here we sit in this sanctuary. We watch on live streaming, seeking forgiveness for behavior that seems beyond redemption. So I ask myself, is that why we are here? Do we come together on these high holy days to try to cleanse ourselves of what the Hebrew says are sins, al chet shechatanu, for the sins we have committed, by offering a confession and seeking forgiveness from a God that for many people is remote at best, or perhaps even non-existent? Is that what this is all about? Or is there something more subtle, but at the same time more profound? As I reflect on the meaning of this day, more penetrating to the human soul. I have been preaching on Yom Kippur for more than 60 years. Never in all that time do I remember a moment when I believed as strongly as I do today that we, the Jewish people, must listen to the voice at Sinai as we have never done before. Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and we will listen. It is the covenant that we accepted, the promise that we made, that we would be the witness and the messengers, that we would always remember that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, that we would never forget that we are an Am Segulah, a treasured people, and that because we were slaves, that we have a mission to bring justice and compassion and fairness and caring and freedom and respect for all human life into this world. There can be no compromise with that calling, no hiding behind any fear of retribution or criticism, no shirking of that responsibility. That is who we are as a people, and that is who we must be at this moment of extreme peril to our way of life and even to human life itself. One sin in the list I just read, one sin is missing. It is the sin of inaction. When I entered the rabbinate, this country and the world were very different. There was a single American religion, Protestantism. The New York Yankees dominated baseball. The Boston Celtics, basketball. The Montreal Canadiens, hockey. And the Green Bay Packers, football. Segregation was a way of life in much of the country. Sexual orientation was never public. Gender discrimination was common and even accepted. Then life began to change. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Blacks entered baseball and professional sports. Women began to assert themselves and even entered positions in political life. The war in Vietnam caused major divisions in the population, and the civil rights movement created a seismic political shift that remains to this day. Immigration and population growth began to cause a change in the religious, ethnic, and racial makeup of the country. We then elected a black president, and he became the symbol of those decades of change. There was great hope. But that moment also became the rallying cry of those who felt disaffected and left behind. These United States needed to return to their white Christian roots, even if that meant doing so by political and physical violence. We Jews have survived centuries of living in countries where we were not welcomed. Somehow we endured throughout those centuries. In the early 1930s in Germany, we naively believed that silence and keeping a low profile would allow us to do so again. That did not happen. Now we are confronted with a movement that would lie, cheat, steal, and use force in order to install a system that would deny basic human rights to those who disagreed. This is a moment, I believe, that brings us to our oath at Sinai. We came here to a promised land, and that promise is being threatened. Al chet shechatanu, for the sin of inaction. A friend of mine, now retired, who spent his life in the National Security Agency, urged me to watch a movie on Netflix. He watched it at the recommendation of his two sons, who also are in the NSA. That was compelling. So Carol and I watched the movie, Don't Look Up. At times, it seemed silly, even trite. At other times, funny. But at its core, it was deadly serious. For those of you who have not seen it, I will not share the ending. It is about two young scientists who discovered a comet that at a point in about 6 months in the future would collide with the Earth. And because of its size, it would destroy this planet. After many attempts, these two young people and another respected member of the scientific community would meet with the President of the United States, a female, to inform her of the impending doom and urge her to take measures to interdict the comet and destroy it in order to save this Earth from that destruction. She and her staff initially laughed at these scientific findings, but demanded that they not be made public because she had an election coming up and wanted nothing to interfere with her being reelected. Eventually, she came to believe the two young scientists and had a rocket built that could destroy the comet. And amid great public fanfare, the rocket blasted off, only to return to Earth at the shock of all who witnessed the event. A wealthy funder of her campaign convinced her that his industry could build a system that would break up the comet and collect all of its valuable minerals and make them very wealthy. Now, while waiting for this system to be built, the comet was becoming visible, thus causing all those who were told there was no comet and lived in denial to wonder what was the truth. The President had rallies throughout the country, and the rallying cry was, "Don't look up." let us together deny the truth. Truth about a virus, elections, climate change, all being threatened to gain power and money. Nearly 1/3 of this nation remains unvaccinated. The same number believes that we do not have a legitimate president and that the climate is not changing. All of this in spite of nearly 1 million deaths from COVID, dozens, if not hundreds, of arrests for attempting to overthrow an election, and the melting of the ice caps, the warming and the rising of oceans, and the obvious and dangerous change of weather patterns. Facts do not matter. Truth becomes belief without evidence. Just stand together and proclaim, don't look up. Al chet shechatanu, for the sin of inaction. A beautiful story is the book, The Bookseller of Dachau. A young woman in the United States whose name is Grace, just a few years ago, received a letter from Dachau, Germany, informing her that she has inherited property from someone whose name is Matilda. It is a name unfamiliar to her, but she is very curious. Grace knows that her mother, now deceased, was sent to the United States from Germany when she was an infant to escape the war. She was adopted. Grace knows nothing about her family history. She travels to Dachau to learn about her inheritance. Grace finds the property, which is a bookstore. It is run by a young German gentleman, Archie, who is Jewish. Grace believes that she is not. Archie knows the history for which Grace is searching. It is all revealed in a long manuscript. Archie decides to feed this manuscript to Grace a bit at a time. Grace learns that Matilda was raised in a different town in Germany. She was not Jewish, but living in her building was a Jewish family. Matilda was closest of friends with Hans, a young man in that family. As we all know, step by step, the Germans deprived the Jews of their rights, separated them, attacked them, and murdered them. Hans's family was forcibly removed from their apartment. Hans escaped, and Matilda decided to hide him in an attic, part of her bedroom, in their house, in their apartment. Her father discovered Hans and turned him over to German soldiers, now living in his former apartment. Hans did not know that Matilda now was pregnant with his child. Matilda is furious with her father, but remains in the apartment and gives birth to her daughter. Her father is terrified of the Nazis and by deceitful means steals her child and sends her to the United States. He tries to convince Matilda that he did so to protect them and the baby. Matilda leaves home and travels to Dachau because she believes Hans is there. She finds work in a bookstore and discovers Hans in the Dachau concentration camp. She manages to exchange letters, giving him hope and keeping him alive. As the Americans get close to liberating the camp, the Germans send the prisoners on a death march. Matilda loses track of Hans. She returns to the town in which she was raised. One day, there is a knock on her door, and it is Hans. They marry, but have no children. They return to live in Dachau and become the owners of the bookstore. Matilda's search for her family is a lifelong enterprise. Grace learns all of this history and comes to understand that Matilda and Hans are her grandparents. The baby was her mother. She knows that Matilda died just after she received a letter. Archie has informed Grace that his grandfather and Hans met in the concentration camp and became best friends. Archie has one more bit of history. He takes Grace to a retirement home and leads her to a room in which two gentlemen are visiting with each other. Archie says to Grace, "I would like to introduce you to my grandfather, and this gentleman, Grace, is your grandfather, Hans." It is more than a tearful moment. Archie and Grace marry, and the story ends. But the story does not end for us. The Holocaust, in all of its horror, taught many lessons. Many Jews lived in denial, believing that Hitler and Nazism was a passing phase. Almost all of them died. That is not what Matilda believed. She needed to hide Hans. When he was taken away, she needed to find him. She needed to give him hope that he could survive. Matilda spent many waking hours searching for her baby, but at the very least, she needed to rescue the father of their daughter. Her letters, her contact, kept him alive. Matilda was not guilty of the sin of inaction. At a moment of Yizkor, we can remember her and many others who throughout our history have fulfilled their oath, our oath at Sinai. We will do, and we will listen. It is not forgiveness that we should seek. Rather, we seek to have the courage and the vision to bring hope where there is despair, to bring healing where there is suffering, to bring enlightenment where there is ignorance, to bring justice where there is injustice, to bring open-mindedness where there is bigotry, to bring the determination of our ancestors to give this nation and this world the promise of freedom and liberty and opportunity and the pursuit of happiness and of continued life on this planet. Let us commit to overcome the sin of inaction. We then will be written and sealed in the book of life for a good and blessed year. Shana Tova to all of you.